Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, the podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We're kind of getting off the Bruce train, though I'm sure he'll come up. I'm having one of my social media, followers, people that I love following, Matt Donnelly, writer, performer, father, husband, podcaster, magician, all around good guy. Welcome to the podcast.
I also hand paint Civil War figurines.
Little bitty. Yeah. Um, when uh when the kids ask, "What do you do for a living, Daddy?" What do you tell them?
My kids think I'm a magician, and that's really weird for me. But they asked me to come in for career day, and I thought, like, there's no way they want me to come in and talk about podcasting to first and second graders.
Yeah.
Um, but and I think because I have to leave sometimes for weeks at a time, and so that's a big impact on them. So yeah, I think they think I'm a magician.
Which is not something, if you had told even 5 years ago, Matt, that would have
Right.
been
Yeah,
right.
just under 5 years into it. I have a very unusual story of magic for sure.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that. So yeah, Matt has been on the show once before. We were both our podcasts were up for an award, which was very weird that you ended up having to pay to be nominated and you had to pay to get the award.
Yeah.
And it kind of went away. But at the time we were both we were talking about each other. We were like, hey, go and vote for, Ice Cream Social. And you guys, well, hey, go, report for Set Listing Bruce. And so we were on a little bit and you talked about, you gave me some great Bruce Springsteen stories. But just in case someone has not listened to that episode, you want to give us your elevator pitch
For Ice Cream Social?
or just yourself?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I moved out to Vegas in 2008, following my wife who got cast in Jersey Boys. Moved out here from New York. I am an actual Jersey boy. I interned. I got an internship for Penn and Teller, um, and then they let me try to start writing for them as an intern, and they liked my writing and they hired me as a writer. And so I worked with Penn and Teller on every season of American season of Fool Us, and also on a show called Penn and Teller Tell a Lie that was on Discovery Channel, and a
Yeah.
couple of other projects as well.
Do How did you get the internship? Just
So funny enough, so my wife, we moved out to Vegas. This is her second time in Vegas. Her first time in Vegas, she was out here to be in a show called Mamma Mia,
mhm.
and in it, she was in it with a woman named Teresa Goudot, who was the wife of Michael Goudot, who was Penn's radio co-host.
Yeah.
And so I knew Michael from a couple of trips out here before we moved out here. And Michael Goudot is the nicest guy, very talented juggler entertainer himself. And he was the other go-to writer for Penn and Teller. And so when I heard they're doing a Discovery Channel show, I just wrote Penn an email begging him to let me intern. Said, I'll just
Okay.
pick up coffee, I'll do anything. And I'd only known Penn from hanging out with him at his movie nights gatherings.
How
His
did
wife
you
had,
get how did you get that connection?
his wife briefly was really into improv right at the time I moved out there, which that's very lucky because she's not into improv like that anymore.
Mhm.
Um, but everywhere she went to see an improv show, I was in because I was really heavily involved in improv in the New York scene. I taught at the Pit, People's Improv Theater. I taught in the acting program at the New York Film Academy. I was a performer, performing 3 or 4 shows a week at various different theaters. And so when I got out here, I was very lucky. I got cast in Wayne Brady's show. So Wayne Brady had an improv show at the Venetian. Again, that was also brief, so the timing on that was perfect. Um, and she came and saw me in that, and then she started. She had me host a charity poker tournament for her for Opportunity Village, and then I just kind of stayed friends with her, and so she started inviting me to movie night.
That's kind of cool. because it, I love just the randomness of this.
It's random, man. It's real random.
Right? I love the idea. You know, I am someone who I had a boss 4 or 5 years ago that says, "Hey, if you're not managing your career, you aren't going to have a very good one." I was like, well, that's the story of my life. I got hired by a company that did call center work. I liked it. They paid me. They didn't go out of business. I'm going to work till they lay me off. And I guess now, and I think, right, if you had said 10 years ago, well, let me put down where I think my life will be career-wise, right? You're going, what the hell?
Same with my wife, like she went out for
Yeah,
Jersey Boys and Jersey Boys closed. And then we kind of liked living in Vegas, but for a few key reasons, musicals aren't ever going to be the thing here that they
right.
once were. And so she also is now a comedic clown and host for Spiegelworld and Absinthe, and it's
Yeah.
like, and she's laughing because she said we moved out here like a comedy writer and a musical theater actor, and now we're a clown and a magician. So
Yeah, and you've shared a little bit on Penn, but you married into a show business family, right? Like your wife has decent, fairly impressive roots from her family.
yeah. Her grandmother on one side was a vaudeville act called the Clark Sisters. Her grandmother on the other side was Ruby Keeler, who was in 42nd Street for the Parade, all the Busby Berkeley movies. She's a star on
Yeah,
the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her father was a equity stage manager, and at one point was helped running Radio City Music Hall. Her mother was a dance captain, Bob Fosse, Broadway, in tours and all that stuff. And yeah, I was the first person in my family to try to be in show business, and so we started dating. And I thought I was trying to be an actor from the time I was like, 15. I was, trying to get involved with stuff, and I was doing improv everywhere, and I thought that was going to somehow get me places. And it did. It gave me auditions here and there, and it got me in
yeah.
a couple of in small movies and things like that.
And you were in a Vegas commercial, if I remember seeing you,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you're a
yeah.
group of the guys, right?
One of those what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas
Yes,
commercials. Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was funny. The coolest time I had with commercials was I was in I was in a fantasy football commercial with Jacksonville Jaguars, Maurice
Hmm.
Jones-Drew. And that one was cool because I was a bartender at the time, and that commercial would always come on while I was working, you know? So that was always like a fun bit where like everyone at the bar got to look and see me up on the screen. So I never felt more famous than that fantasy football commercial.
I can imagine. Um, so as you started being friends, how did you end up getting uh, to be one of the co-hosts on Penn Sunday School?
Oh yeah, that's really where so we did I interned on Tele Live for Discovery Channel, and then uh they hired me for that. And that was a funny thing because I basically was just running around. I would advance scout restaurants that had Wi-Fi so we could like run and that kind of stuff, and I would just go pick up things, and I was really just a little errand guy. And all of a sudden I was making Penn laugh at movie nights, so he's like, he just got an email saying like, why don't we let Matt take a pass on these scripts? And I was so nervous uh, that I actually got up from my computer immediately and I just went to the gym. I went to the gym and I sweat and I worked out, and I was like, I need to get all of this nervousness and anxiety and fear out of me. I wouldn't write a thing, and so I came back and I wrote like 12 jokes in their hour-long script, and I kept four of them, and that was considered good. And
Yeah, that
so
is right. Yeah.
And then I wrote 12 for the next one and got kept three, and all of a sudden they hired me. And but then that show only ran for one season,
Right.
and it was because because Penn and Teller had higher standards for science than Discovery Channel,
Yeah.
because they thought they had this Bible of all these cool things, and Penn and Teller were striking them down left and right. Like, that's not true. That's not good science. That's not. We can't say
Hmm.
that's true.
Yes.
And so that's the one season happened. So I was in the orbit at that point, and then he started his podcast, and he started with Michael because they were a radio team, and so they kind of got the band back together, so to speak. Um, and then Michael got a gig, and so he was going to be out, but Penn wanted to still record, and so they both thought of me. I went in as a substitute host, and it went very well. It went very well. All of his management and stuff said, one, that I should be definitely the first call if Godot is out, and um, then I substitute hosted a few more times, and there's a big push to get me on there permanently, and that's what happened. I didn't ask for it or push for it at all. They just said, if you want it, it's yours. You can keep coming in and doing it. And I said, yes, please.
Well, I would imagine, and we don't have to get into the business part of it, but it's nice that it's a gig, but it seems like it's just a fun couple of hours every week, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah. Like I got paid at one point. It was like my highest paying thing,
Yeah.
Um, it was a big help to me
Sure.
to get that footing because all of the with Discovery Channel not getting renewed and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And remember, up to this point of the story, I've still never tried a magic trick.
Yes.
I was really just so grateful that it was happening. But as the years go on, look, Penn's friends with a lot of people, and Penn Jillette is a fascinating guy. He's a fascinating guy whether you're into magic or not. He's a really good thinker. He's a really great storyteller.
I want to interrupt you. I was just going to say that he is an amazing storyteller,
Yeah.
and he is proof. I had my friend Sarah Hickman, who is a musician. She would joke, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. It's like when she's doing,
Yeah.
like when she's doing an introduction on a song, she'll embellish what drove the song. And I love that Pence is like, oh, and we're probably doing this wrong, right? But here's the story I'm going to tell.
Yeah. And so like I always say, like there's a lot of people who are closer friends with Ben, I think, who would love to talk to him for 2 hours a week,
Yeah.
and I get to,
Mhm.
no, I because I've co-hosted other podcasts and I've gone
Yeah.
on guests on other podcasts. I mean, like there there are many times where we sit down to start before the show starts to go like, you got anything? No. You got anything? No. We got nothing. And
Yeah.
then we quickly kind of come up with like two or three kernels of something that we might bring up on air.
Yeah.
And then the theme kicks in, and then Penn launches into something that we did not discuss at all. We just thought of it during the theme, and that'll take up a half hour, 45 minutes on the episode to just run with something. He's got that Carney talker
Yes.
vibe to him, and so he can just go. And so yeah, I can say probably full-throatedly that not only is it a fun gig, but it's probably the easiest co-hosting job there is.
Well, what I love is like you do an episode that recently basically Penn's buying a new bass. And
Yeah.
and it ends up being this amazing story that you like. If you had said, "Yeah, well, okay, that'll be 5 minutes," and then instead, it's just
No, I know.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned from him the most, podcast skill wise, is that he's always got some audience perception in his head,
Hmm.
and so like he'll one of the things he'll get out of that is he'll be like, well, you may think that this is only worth this much, or you may think that I have already gotten blah blah, and he starts answering assumption questions to people, and then then he'll turn that person into a character and like
Yeah.
pit the whole story against this imaginary listener and that kind of stuff. He's really skilled that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I just is. It's just, and my boss owns a Tesla, and I'm like, okay, you've got to listen to the story about him. One, because it's a funny story, and two, as a warning to you. Okay.
Yeah. Penn got stranded for these listeners.
Yes,
Penn got
yes,
stranded
yes, and
driving to Utah in his
even
Tesla.
though the Tesla kept telling him, "You're, like, hey, idiot, you're going to do it." Nah, I'm fine. I'm fine. So
By being skeptical of Tesla's instruments, he got himself
yeah,
stranded. And that
yeah,
was that was educational, right? Like I didn't know that. Like once a
yeah.
Tesla shuts off, it's a brick. It's just a giant.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a,
Yeah, like, oh, we have a, how you talk about a dead phone is a paperweight. Well, this is
yeah,
just a huge paperweight.
you
Yeah.
can't tow it.
So I want to get into your magical journey, but before we do that, I want to talk about. I remember watching clips of Fool Us on YouTube with the British show, and I went, "Wow,
Yeah.
this is really interesting." And then when they brought it to the US, and then we got, they did the second season with Jonathan again, and then they brought in Allison. But I I remembered one being impressed that how positive of a show it is. And I know I'm not saying anything new or unique, but there is truly um, a a sense of we're trying to show off people being entertaining and doing magic. And yeah, we just kind of throw in a contest in the middle. So when did you start getting involved with the show? And I I started out being a patron member of your Abracadabra because of the behind the scenes story. And since then, I've learned to love y'all's podcast and embrace, the three of you talking.
So we
But
got you, Jesse. We got you
yes, yes,
good.
we did.
We hooked
Yes,
you. We reeled
yes,
you in.
yeah,
Yeah. So I so when Fool Us first came to the United States, there was a couple of years gap there in between. Well, first I say is that Penn and Teller are brilliant, and because they were asked to be judges on other talent shows and other talent competitions before, especially when back in the day, like that was in the in
yeah,
the in the birth of America's Got Talent and American Idol, there were a lot of other shows like those. Um, and Penn and Teller never want to do it because they didn't want to judge stuff they didn't know, right? Like how am I supposed to tell dancers what to do, that kind of thing, when we can't dance, and they can't. Um, the so when they came up with the show, like Fool Us, it was like I can tell if magicians fool us. That was the whole kind of premise, and the impact on it has been significant. So you see more people. That show showcases a lot of women doing magic, a lot of people of color doing magic, and then the show's been on long enough that we've gotten to see it take hold. So you see a lot more representation in magic around the world. Also, magic's more popular than ever right now. There's so many magic venues as I'm touring them, I'm performing at them. There's so many magic venues opening up left and right for people. More people have a mainstream understanding of magic as a concept, where they want to see some or see good versus bad, that kind of stuff, versus just like people used to just think magician meant birthday party.
yeah,
And so it's really had a huge impact on magic's popularity, and also helped the amount of people that can do it and have access to it. That combined with the internet, I should say. But Penn leaves
sure,
clues in his busts, and people can go on the internet and find those things and learn magic and that kind of stuff. And I always joke about magic being great right now because, like, if you go to a Vegas casino, they sell books on counting cards for blackjack in the gift shops of casinos.
right,
So if card counting were that easy to do and that dangerous, they wouldn't, you
right,
know.
yes,
But everybody having a little bit of knowledge helps tremendously. And I think that's what the show does, is the show gives a large audience a little bit of understanding of what it means to perform magic and things to consider before magic. And that's a great audience to have as a magician. People come in knowing a little bit, and it leads to a certain curiosity that's different than, if I perform, I don't stand up and pretend to have magical powers, right? So
right,
that's not the kind of thing I'm going for. So having an audience be slightly educated on magic is great for me, ideal for
yeah.
me.
Well, and one of the things that, and I promise I won't do too much ass kissing, but one of the
No,
things
no,
that maybe it's
you
okay.
do all you want. You do all
Okay.
you want.
So in one of the early behind the scenes, you talked about very quickly, we decided that anytime there was a volunteer, if we could use Allison, we should.
Yeah.
And when I heard that and I started watching it, she is just perfect. And I don't know if this is acting or just honestly herself, but she genuinely is disgusted when it's something disgusting. She is, skeptical when it looks to be dangerous, and she is really like amazed at the end, like, oh, I can't believe you did that.
She's a brilliant comedic actor,
Yes.
and that was borne out at many a large scale testing via movies and television for a very
Hmm.
long time.
Yeah.
She's also a very well known face, and it's a unique, beautiful face, and so
Yeah.
if you can get that face to react to your magic, it's going to help your career. And
Yeah.
a lot of magicians have definitely taken advantage of that. She's gotten
Yeah.
savvier as the years have gone on, though.
Oh, I
She's on
bet.
to stuff. She's gotten quite an education in magic because of it.
Yeah.
And so she's not as easy to bowl over as she was in
Yeah.
early seasons. But yeah, so I was involved as soon as it came over to season two.
Hmm.
The first season was shot in England and aired over there, and then finally got recut and aired over here. And that's the whole thing about Fool Us in general. It was almost like a happy accident.
Yeah.
CW picked it up and they recut the episodes to fit the American standards for commercial breaks and all that stuff. And it became their highest rated show. And they just aired it in the summer. It was supposed to be just a little, almost like a little airing. Like they thought, Penn and Teller's management thought it would air that season and they could do a different, bigger version of the show for another network or something once people saw how the show worked for American audiences. And it worked too well that CW said, don't go anywhere. You're staying right here. And so here we are 9 seasons later. And then I heard it was coming over. I had worked with the producers on Tell a Lie, but I was still just, the intern who got hired as a comedy guy. They weren't necessarily looking to keep me, around or
Hmm.
whatever. And I was actually at Penn's 60th birthday party in LA. It was a big thing, and they were there. And I had just been hired by Lisa Lampanelli to do some punch up work for her. And then I also wrote a show that was going on downtown here in Vegas. And so when I saw them, I got to drop those two nuggets on them to be like, hey, I'm not just a Penn and Teller lackey, even though secretly I was definitely still just a Penn and Teller lackey. Um, and and it was all just permission to write a submission. So I wrote a submission, and I wrote it based on watching all the illegal YouTube clips of the British show,
Right.
you know. And I called them up. They hadn't heard anything. I called them up to check in because the season was approaching, taping was approaching, and I said, "Hey, you know, what's going on? Can I, what's
Hmm.
can I come to work?" Kind of thing. And they said, "Well, I liked some of your stuff. It was pretty good. You know, maybe try to write some more stuff for me. We'll take a look at it. Like here's a joke that someone gave to us. It was like for Jonathan Ross, the British host. It was like, I love now that I'm hosting a show over here in America. I got to adjust certain words. Like we use bin instead of garbage can, lift instead of whatever. It's like, and you guys say the word dentist, and we don't have a word for that. And that was the joke or whatever. And I said, okay, you want me to write more like that? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. And then we hung up the phone. And 5 minutes later, my phone rang, and it was the executive producer, Andrew, and he said, Matt, that dentist joke for Jonathan. I go, yeah. He goes, you wrote that joke. I said, I did. He said, so I just told you to write more jokes like you. And I said, you did. He said, I'll see you on Monday. And I hung up the phone, and that's when I was hired for Fools.
Did you just not want to tell him? Did you not want to
Correct.
embarrass
Yeah.
him? Yeah,
Yeah,
just yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
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 That's greatness. That is a wonderful story.
I literally was
That
like,
is.
I don't know what to do, but I'm shutting up. Like I
Yeah.
like this is so weird. I'm gonna
Mhm.
shut up. And then
Yeah.
but the phone rang right away, so I didn't have to worry about it.
Hmm.
But that's how I got hired. Strangely enough, it wasn't just a Penn and Teller favor. I had to really try to work to get that to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but then, yeah, so then I'm working on every season. I work with Jonathan Ross was the first year, and that was great. Jonathan Ross is the David Letterman of England, and he's
Yeah.
hosted a billion shows out there. And he knows television. And so he was so comfortable walking around this giant production. And I was basically just walking around with him. And I basically took a television education class from Jonathan Ross. Like he just knew
Yeah.
how to talk to everybody. I watched it. And so I was always co-writing with Jonathan. He'd always turn jokes inside out or ask for three different punchlines or whatever.
Mhm.
I never just gave him stuff and then he went with it. But it was in the meantime, I was helping him with. I saw how he prepped for interviewing audience members, the magicians,
Yeah.
and all this other stuff. And so, yeah. And then Jonathan Ross, while he's the David Letterman of England, he was not the David Letterman of here. And so he has a lot of projects. His wife is the one behind the Kingsman.
Okay.
It basically became too crazy to schedule and too expensive to make sure he was staying the host. And
Hmm.
so CW wanted a familiar face. Everybody wanted a woman to host when Jonathan bowed out. And then Allison Hannigan landed on our doorstep.
Yeah.
And
And, obviously, How I Met Your Mother, Buffy, American Pie movies. And I say this with all love to Jonathan, right? It I hate to say better, but she is different and she has really grown into it. And I think the three of them have a lot of fun on camera. They make this a very relaxing, 10 to 12 weeks, and of course, not including repeats. You get to go hang out with your friends and get to watch some amazing story,
yeah, like this is
performances.
a moment coming up in this upcoming season where was like Penn and Teller doing a bunch of different bits, and so it's a Penn
Yeah.
and Teller bit, and so they quickly throw Allison into it, and the first rehearsal was a little all over the place because they just had the magic effect down, but not they didn't do it in their show, so they had no script for it,
Hmm.
and it was really really awesome. I got to put on my improv helmet, and so like the first take went through, and I just ran on stage, and I just like sharpened Penn's to dos,
Yeah.
and then I sharpened Allison's to dos, and then I was like, and this should have an impact on you, and this should have an impact on you, and I made like quick tweaks, like literally like 30 seconds, and all of a sudden they both just exploded. It crushed this bit, and the director turned to me and was like, "What the hell did you say to him?" And I was like, I was like, well, you have two very gifted entertainers up on stage who really know what to do. I just literally just gave
Yeah.
a quick little outside observation, and I got to look really, really good because Allison Hannigan is fantastic with
Yeah.
comedic direction, and Ben Gillette is fantastic with direction. So it was awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love the show, and I do think, I wonder, it it appears they enjoy the two show. It must be, listening to him talk about it, part of what would I think other people would be beaten down by is, oh crap, now we got to come up with 13 new tricks. You hear Penn talk about it. That was what we love. We love coming up with new bits. And so I'm sure there's pressure on it, but it gives them excuse to let's find new things to do.
yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they're creating a ton of tricks right now. Like we haven't even gotten news that we're renewed for season 10. We never do until the show. Usually about 4 episodes into the season, we'll find out whether or not we're going to
Yeah.
do more. But Penn and Teller just put in 2 new tricks into their show this
Hmm.
weekend,
I
and
I would hope you get 10. It seems to be that would be kind of cool. I mean, not that 9 isn't anything to be sneezing at, but it would be kind of a decade.
well, it's a very strange time for television. You know, uh, Penn and Teller's Fool Us is over 100 episodes, so we're past
Yeah.
that point where you typically usually would pump the brake. In old
Yeah.
television, older television,
Right.
you'd be like, great, now we have enough to syndicate and go around, and you
It
can resell it all the time. And re-aired on different television networks. But now, look at like American Idol, AGT, all those shows, The Voice, the shows that have made it are still on the air, and even though they're getting a fraction of their viewership, because the answer is like, what else do you stick in there
Yeah.
that gets eyeballs? Because it's so hard to get new eyeballs on shows now. The way people watch television is so strange right now. It's actually, if anything, in flux. We're not fully transitioned to timeless television, and so
Well,
it's
yeah. I mean, Piff ended up putting his special on YouTube,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
crazy. And I appreciated it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was wonderful, but it was kind of, it's just on YouTube. But, you
yeah.
know,
Because there are very few. Where do you go with a magic special?
yeah,
It's very hard to figure that out, and then a comedy one at that.
yeah.
It's very difficult to figure these things out.
Mhm.
And even now, right? Like so, like if you have a Comedy Central special, like say Piff got to go there,
Yeah,
well, it airs once or twice, and
yeah.
then it's in their library, and then they may or may not put it up on their app, and then how do you get people to eyeballs on it? And so Piff really wanted as much freedom to have eyeballs on it as possible, so they could always go back to it and watch it. And so, and you
Yeah.
can see it. I mean, the its first day was like 70,000, and now it's already up to a crazy amount of views. It
Yeah,
just
it's just crazy.
immediately rolled on it. So
All right. All right. So I won't keep you too much longer, but I did want to know, one of the things that I find fascinating is um, your journey on how you went from being a writer, stand up, improv, and all of a sudden, as your kids call you, oh, dad's a magician.
yeah,
So,
well, as you heard my story earlier, like
yeah,
there was no master plan, and there certainly was no room for error. Like if I was swinging through the air and if I reached for that next vine, it wasn't there. I was just gonna fall.
right.
And that in New York, I was always trying to like write and act and kind of maneuver, and I book this, book that, little things. It was like you're always trying to slowly build in some kind of career. And in Vegas, I just was not. That was not an option, and so I really couldn't figure out much to do. So.
Because for one point you were a manager for the 50 Shades of Grey, right? Like, so that
Yeah,
was a gig. So yeah,
yeah. And I wrote for, Spiegel World, if people are familiar with Absinthe, The Gazillionaire.
yeah.
And then there's a show Opium, and I was part of that creation team. And so I was good at getting gigs for sure, but there was nothing that was geared towards career. Um, it just was, so there's, and so I was interviewing magicians. I had to interview every magician before they talked to the host. And I was just interviewing professional magician after professional magician after professional magician, and it was out of that frustration, like knowing that I had really struggled with comedy writing to, I was always working enough to stay with it, but I'd never got a break that I felt like I was working on the thing.
Hmm.
And that's even, Fool Us aside, because Fool Us is still my biggest writing credit. And it's just that we shoot that whole season in 2.5 weeks. So that's what I mean by like I wanted to work. What was I doing the other 49 weeks?
Right.
So it was just mouthing off to Penn. I just said, God, I should just learn 4 magic tricks and do corporate improv or do corporate magic. And Penn kind of looked at me like, you entitled bastard, and said, it's harder than you think, but you might be better at it than you think. Why don't you try learning one goddamn trick? But he meant it. It was meant. I think even coming out of his mouth, I think it was meant to be ball busting. And at the end of the sentence, it was like, actually, I mean it. You know, I think it started with like, why don't you? I think you wanted to shut me down,
Right.
and then mid sentence was like, I'm actually curious if Matt could do it. I think it really was all that in one sentence, and I felt it. I started sweating. I was like, I can't say no to this. I can't say no. I keep like, nah.
I mean, he's double dog dared me, right? Like
Yeah.
like he's thrown it out there. Okay, let's see you, big boy. Let's
He'd
do
be
it.
like, no, I'm good. I'm good, Penn. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, he spent the rest of that season kind of trying to like come up with different ways for me to try different tricks or try to perform something. And I was like, he's really got this in his head. And that season went over, and then I actually did end up working on other shows and kind of put that aside. Uh, and then my dad came out to visit and sat in a Penn Sunday school, and Penn brought us to his house for lunch. And then Penn went back to talk about me doing magic at lunch. And the time had passed. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's still in his brain. I really can't procrastinate this much more. And he said, you want to stay away from cards because you're starting so late and kids are so good at cards, and you can get lost trying to come up with the perfect blank trick, this trick. You can't, you won't be able to keep up. Don't get lost in cards. Okay. He said, and everything from the waist up. Do all your magic from the waist up, because that way, if you're playing a parlor, you're doing close up, you're doing a stage, all your material can just translate to wherever you're playing. And that was unbelievably sage, because that's so I play a lot of different kinds of venues, and I don't have to make that many adjustments, and I'm very lucky. He gave me that advice, and then after lunch went out to the car, and my dad just goes, "You just got basketball advice from Michael Jordan. What are you going to do with it?"
Bam. I mean, that's spot on.
Yeah, so then I started going to I started secretly. I went behind. I was gonna thought it'd be funny just to surprise Penn, but they were working with Johnny Thompson, was their magic director, and Johnny was one of the most nicest and welcoming people on the planet. Loved magic, and loved teaching it. And so I started going to Johnny's house, an afternoon here, an afternoon there, and he was teaching me magic. So the first person to teach me magic was Penn and Teller's guy, and so I thought that
Yeah.
would be a nice surprise for them. And then all of a sudden, once again, I was jobless. Uh, and I was like, I know all these magicians from Fool Us and around town, and I have this kind of street cred of being a lackey to Penn and Teller. And so I thought, what if every magician that I'm close with teaches me one trick, and then I'll do a show of those tricks. And that's when I did a crowdfunder, and I went to seven magicians. They taught me seven tricks. Now, Johnny said yes first, so Penn said yes second because Johnny was on board, and then Teller said yes because Penn and Johnny said yes, and so then every magician said yes.
Right. That
I could have
helps.
done 20 tricks taught by 20 magicians if I
Right.
wanted to at that point, because now it was a careful dominoes placed to push them in the right order. And so, yeah. And then Piff the Magic Dragon saw that show, and he helped me on one of the tricks. So he was the other magicians who said yes, and said, "Why don't you come open for me on tour?" And I did, as a magician, my first year of magic, I did 60 shows on the road opening for Piff. I mean, that's stupid. That's just dumb. It's
Yeah.
dumb.
I saw you in Dallas, at the Improv. We got to talk a little bit.
Those are great
Uh,
shows, by the way.
they were, yeah, they were. And I got my little ice cream social poker chip, and we got to visit and take a picture, but it was a nice duo. You fit the tone of the show well, and
Yes.
it it was. And what I thought was really funny is because I had not seen you, but I had been the fundraiser. I'd gotten my little Mind Noodler sticker and all this, um, and you're in overalls, but you don't do an accent. You just, and it's worked perfect. Like, oh yeah, I happen to be in overalls, but let's talk about this with your big old knife. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
yeah, for your audience, I started off
yeah,
in order to learn all that magic, and I was a comedy writer, so I was
yeah,
like, oh, I'll write for my character nice and big. I'm going to write for a big character.
yeah,
I'm a bigger guy. People like when I play big, and then it'll help me instantly write.
right,
Right, if I'm playing a big character, so I played Hillbill the Psychic Hillbilly,
yeah.
and that was my original show. And the only problem with that is that when I went on the tour, when I went touring, is that people wanted to know where in Appalachia I was really from, and when they found out I was a character off stage at a comedy club, they hated my guts. They were
Mm,
really mad at me for not being that person.
right.
And then I basically was like, I don't want to become the Larry the Cable Guy of magic, so I'll just start just being me.
Hmm.
But I learned every trick. I'm new to magic, so every trick is learned to overalls.
Right.
Pockets and ditching and hiding and grabbing, very
Yeah.
important things for a magician. And so I only knew it in overalls.
I know that RJ gives you a hard time about that on your one of your other podcasts about it, but it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to urge Matt's very funny. I I'm one of these people. I don't want to be a magician, though I do every once in a while try to when I'm on a con call, I'll try to do a
But
French drop.
stop.
Yeah.
You're already doing it wrong. So I'll let you know off air.
See,
I'll fix it.
exactly, right? Yeah, I know. And so, but um, but I love watching. It's kind of like Mark Evanier, the blogger who's written for a lot of comics, talked about he never was a baseball fan, but he loved hearing Dodger games with Vin Scully because there's something beautiful about watching someone is so good at something and watching him do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's why I like watching a lot of magic is I love this. And the other thought that I Penn has said, and I'd love for you to hear your thoughts on this, you have to have the magic and you have to have the ease on stage. And you did it backwards because of your background, right? You're like, if I pulled you in and I said, oh, hey, Matt, I need you to do 10 minutes in front of, motivational speech. Let's do a talk on my team. You could just sit there and roll off anything very quickly because you're comfortable on stage.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of different for you, right?
For sure, and that's not, there are plenty of great performing magicians,
Yeah.
but it was certainly a superpower. And I'd say like the thing about uh I'd say like a lot of magicians work towards their stuff becoming like perfect
Yeah.
within an inch of its life. Um and I owe a lot of this to Piff because Piff is not like that. I mean, Piff is a very, very passionate magician and surprisingly passionate. I think people think because he's a giant dragon. People don't know that he had a career before being a dragon where he was absolutely huge magic nerd,
Yeah.
big magician guy. Um, and then, but we both like things to go a little off the rails, and so I got to see him do that all the time, still accomplish his show while letting some things get really off the rails. And I love that because as an improviser, doing improv, especially if you're doing shows like Whose Lines It Anyway style shows,
Yeah.
on the one hand, like, yes, it's all improvised, but also it's all in this container of games that you're used to seeing and playing. And so there's not as much of a craziness to it. And I always wanted, when I would do improv shows, to make sure that the audience knew that something was definitely only happening in the room for them tonight.
Right.
Like, even with all the things, whatever, like this was definitely just for you,
Yeah.
And I think it makes performance so special. And so as a magician, I do the same thing. I want something a little off the rails. I want something so dependent on this one unique audience member that like they have to know that it's just for them in the room tonight.
Yeah.
I think that gives people more of their money's worth than the perfect magic trick sometimes. And so, yeah, I can't, I don't have a time machine. I can't go back and start magic at 9, like so many of them do. I can't make references to the amount of, variations of this trick that I'm doing
Right.
and who started and when. I can't do it. And so I can't feel guilt for that either. That's the hard part. That's the only thing I struggle with is I can't feel guilt for being so ignorant still to so much of the magic, you know. But I have to lean into my strengths, and I have 2 boys. So I want to make a living, so I
Yeah.
can I can try to be very funny and make the room very present in my shows.
Well, and I think one of the things that I doing this podcast is, you want your listeners to enjoy spending time with you and your guest. And if you do that, you feel like you're doing a good job. And I thought of this the other day that I had a guy on that was talking about that he saw Bruce in 1974 74, 75, right during the college, right around that, I seen the future of rock and roll that time
Yeah,
period.
yeah, yeah.
And he was saying, gosh, just think of all the shows I missed when he was just starting out and before that happened. And I said, boy, it doesn't matter how soon you find Bruce, you always feel like you're chasing that extra
Like,
point,
I
right?
really
Like,
wish
oh,
I really wish I was out in California watching him lose Battle of the Bands when he was
yeah, exactly,
penniless.
right. Like instead of just like, and so and I think you could do the same thing if you want to. You could always say, well, and I'm going to use, right. I wish I had been in prison or had been sickly as a child, stuck in the bed with a deck of cards, right?
Yes. Yes. Again, for your listeners, is that
Yeah,
whenever I go over by, like, we only have the most badass card tricks
yeah,
on the show and Fool Us. And so when I see someone's going to do a card trick, I look immediately in the bio for time in the hospital as a child,
yes,
prison, or time in Madrid, Spain. Those are the three
yes,
things I look
exactly.
for. And
Yeah,
there's a good chance it's going to be one of those things.
yeah, that's great. All right, so Matt, I'm going to let you go. I want to ask you the Mary question before we go, but tell us, what do you got coming up? You're back on the road now, and also where to find you on your other podcasts.
Yeah, so I'm on tour starting in the fall. I'm working on my show the rest of the summer,
Okay.
but I start touring in the fall. You can go to mynoodler.com to look for that, or follow mynoodler on Instagram. Um, I document my magic journey. I've roped in Jesse to it. That's abracababble.com. Go over to abracababble.com and figure out how to get access to my secret podcast to document my journey. I'll just tell you that now's a good time to get in. I'm about to make two big announcements for things that are coming up for me come the new year. And so it'd be a really good time to head over there. If you need just more chuckling, loving life, preaching fun, just if you want to be a fly on the wall for ridiculous dudes hanging out, I do a podcast with man-child Paul Mattingly, Star Trek, The Experience, former what's it called? Klingon, former Klingon Paul
Yes.
Mattingly. And that's Matt and Mattingly's Ice Cream Social. We've got over 900 episodes waiting for you if you want to hang out with some ridiculous things. And then, of course, I co-host Penn Sunday School, Penn's podcast. And that's also twice weekly on everywhere you get podcasts.
Yeah, and there really is a sense of community both on Penn Sunday School and Ice Cream Social and Abracadabra. And so I actually do that. And I look forward to hear what the new announcements are. And hopefully, you're going to be somewhere in Texas when you tour.
I hope
So
so.
yeah, that way, you're getting yours in the fall, so you don't want to compete against Bruce, right? Like
That's
there's
it.
enough ticket controversy. You don't need. Are you going to have dynamic pricing,
If I
Matt?
did, I would be paying everyone to come see my shows. Like,
Yes, that's crazy.
I
All
just
right.
made I just made $4 to go see the Mind Noodler.
Yay. Wow. All right. When I had you on before, I was not asking this question, so we'll get you to that. I end every podcast with the Mary question. What that is my
Sways, it sways. That's my answer.
wrong question. So Jay Armstrong was an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area, and he would, on his honors English class, they would break apart Thunder Road, look at all the lyrics, look at all the themes, and at the end of the day, he would ask his class, does Mary get in the car? So Matt, that is your question. Does Mary
Yeah.
get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
You know what's funny is I sing this song to my children to go to sleep. And so I think about this all the time. And the truth is that just I can only answer with my heart. I can't break down the lyrics
Mhm.
like those other nerds you were just talking about. I mean, people spend money at college to do that. That seems like a weird. I mean, if I was that kid's parents, I would be
No, it's
questioning it.
high school. He was high school.
Okay,
It was
all
high
right.
school. Okay. High school
So
honors English.
that's even worse. But
Mm.
I would say my heart says she doesn't. It feels like a sad song. It feels like a sad note at the end. It seems like he mispitched his. I think also if you say you ain't a beauty, but hey, you're all right, I wouldn't get in the car either. You know what I mean? So if we're going to analyze lyrics, You just told me I'm not that good looking, but I can leave town with
Yeah,
you. That's not really not Bruce's best, Casanova move. You know,
very
so
nice.
I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say Mary does not get in the car and go.
Great answer. I appreciate it. 60-40, 60% say yes, about
Yeah,
40% say no. So you're not
those 60% are
necessarily,
wrong.
there we go. All right. You've given us your pitches on podcast,
Yeah.
on social media. Where can we find you?
I'm at Sweet Matty D on Twitter, and I'm at My Noodler on Instagram.
All right. Matt, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Listeners, you go hang out. Matt's going to give me a quick magic lesson after we hit non-record. So you guys go talk to your family doctor, get vaccinated, get boosted, and let's try to be kind to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. And done. That was perfect. Hello, everyone. I am Jesse Jackson, and I hope you enjoyed this small clip from one of my Set Listing Bruce episodes. I'm always looking for feedback and, more importantly, guests. If you want to share your Springsteen fandom story and answer the Mary question, post below on the comments or send me an email to setlistingbruce@gmail.com. If you're passionate about other musicians or topics, I'm always up to record a B-side episode where we get off the Bruce train and dive into other topics. For now, stay hard, stay hungry, stay alive. Meet me in a dream of this hard land, and I'll see you further on up the road.